Welcome back to American Taxpayers Revolution. I'm your host, Attorney Todd Long, here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. And as I promised, we are joined now by a Fox News reporter, Liz Peek, who wrote a very interesting article about why the Supreme Court rulings on Obamacare, the gay marriage, property rights are going to help the GOP's 2016 prospects in the presidential election and other races. And we're joined by Liz. Liz, you here?
I can barely hear you because of the music.
Okay, how about now? Is it better?
Better.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks so much for being with us. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you see happening as a result of the Supreme Court rulings that went against the conservatives and why you feel that way?
Well, look, I think a lot of us were thrown into depression last week when one ruling after another came out that were, first, head-scratching in their legal authority, and secondly, clearly very politically motivated and also very liberal. So, you know, I think on the other hand, there has not been such a fire lit under a lot of us in many years. I mean, we've all been kind of used to being browbeaten by a number of regulations, rules, policies, et cetera, that have kind of wafted across the nation's consciousness. But here we had a real direct assault on what many of us felt was a law, I mean, basically the misreading of our health care law for sure, and then the imposition of this disparate impact notion on housing, which is just going to be a complete fiasco in terms of constricting lending, actually pushing lending in totally the wrong direction so as to re-energize the housing boom and bust. And third, the same-sex marriage issue, which I actually do not take issue with in terms of its eventual impact, but clearly was brought about in the wrong way and a way that only furthers divisiveness in the country. So, you know, I think what a lot of Americans should kind of take home from this is, number one, really important to elect a Republican president, because should there be retirements on the court, which there may well be, we surely don't want to add to the liberal majority. And I say liberal majority even though technically most people consider it a conservative-leaning court. What we really know now, in fact, the New York Times had a long piece today in the paper about how it's the most liberal bunch of decisions since the Warren Court. The liberals are very energized, very cohesive, and very driven to enact an agenda that most Americans don't agree with. So, you know, I think that's number one. Number two, if you want to reverse some of these things, if the majority of the country, which is the case, still dislikes Obamacare, the only way now that we're going to get rid of it is to have a Republican president and a Republican Congress, which is challenging. But if you get a landslide victory for a Republican president, you know, the Congress probably will stay in Republican hands. And again, this is a bill, this health care bill, that impacts every American. The majority, clear majority, still don't like it. Yes, they like certain provisions in that bill, but overall, the top-down, one-size-fits-all government mandate about what your health care should look like is still a very unpopular premise in this country, thank heavens.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about just different things and as way you see them, because I'm really curious. I'm a constitutional conservative. I love the Founding Fathers, Reagan, Constitution. I'm a lawyer. So most of my people here, whether they're libertarian or just conservatives, disgusted with the Republican establishment, and also have felt like the court, I think what has happened over the last week with the court decisions, for those people that really pay attention to the Constitution, I mean, the Supreme Court has not been following the Constitution for a long time, from the beginning of when they allow Congress to do unconstitutional earmarks, when they can only tax and spend for the general welfare. Nobody talks about that, but Republicans did that. When they are in Congress, they took earmarks to a whole other level. That's all unconstitutional activity that the court sanctions, and what it takes, whether it's taking out prayer out of public schools or Bible study out of public schools, the Constitution never changed, and the founders had that in all their public schools. So we just see this as a continuation of the court, the federal government saying, we don't care about the Constitution. We're going to do whatever we want. We'll bankrupt you. We'll do health care. And then Justice Roberts, the thing that's even more frustrating is when you look at the Republicans when you say elect a Republican, so we get a conservative court, we'll get, Justice Roberts is nominated by the Republicans, and it's like, can't they find somebody out there of all these federal judges that actually, an Alito, and some of these other guys, Thomas and these guys, and Scalia, how hard it is to find these guys that actually will follow the Constitution. Roberts is out there giving opinions like his job is, and all these opinions on Obamacare. If there's any way to uphold this thing, call it a tax, if there's any way we can make this constitutional, it's my job to do it. And it's like, no, your job's the exact opposite, is to make sure that our rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness are not infringed by the federal government. It's not to find some ways to let them do whatever they want. So my question after saying all that is, if somebody like Jeb Bush is nominated by the Republican establishment, do you think that really conservatives are going to come out and support him or fight, thinking he's going to do anything about any of this stuff? Or do you think it's going to take a nominee, far to the right of him that's going to inspire kind of the Tea Party movement to really fight?
Well, let me just say this. I think it would be really a shame if Jeb Bush turns out to be the nominee, and I'm not at all sure he's going to be, to have people decide that out of principle they would rather have Hillary Clinton. Right. That seems to me like an almost unimaginable decision. One person is corrupt and has been proven on so many occasions to be basically a liar. Right. Jeb Bush is not the choice of conservatives. I understand that, but he is a decent guy. He is certainly going to make better choices than Hillary.
I agree with all that, and I'm there's a lot of people like me with this still. I always pick the lesser of two evils, and for the country, I'm just not going to.
Right?
Yeah, I'm not going to pout about it. I will do that, but I just know there's a lot of people within the Tea Party movement. Certainly, the libertarians feel different. They look at a lot of both of these as just the same. That's just the way they look at it.
Yes, and I think that's a group that's going to have to kind of solve their own conscience problems, right. I guess. But as far as Justice Roberts is concerned, I guess my read of him would be that, on a number of issues, he obviously has voted with the conservatives, such as Citizens United and so forth. And so you kind of are left to wonder, is he human? I mean, he just decided that he didn't want to be the person that goes down in history as standing between America having universal health care or not. And he had somehow arrived at the decision that as a wealthy country, that's something that we should have. I think for a lot of us, the real upshot is we don't really trust the Supreme Court to not be politically or personally motivated. And that sounds unbelievably sort of simple-minded because, people have been saying that for decades.
Right.
But I guess in my head, it still was a check and balance system in the United States, and the Supreme Court would, at the end of the day, side on with legality, and that turned out not to be the case. And so I, like you, am somewhat disillusioned.
Well, I just think that if they want the job, they're just. I mean, the Constitution is not that complicated. I mean, it's there. It really isn't. And obviously, these decisions we're talking about, when the president comes forth and says this is a tax, but we can regulate, we can do Obamacare because it's interstate commerce, and it's obviously that's a farce when somebody's just standing there breathing, not purchasing anything. They're not involved in any interstate commerce. And then Roberts to go out of his way saying, well, obviously that's ridiculous. People aren't engaged in interstate commerce. But if I call this a tax, I'll help the federal government, that's the exact opposite of his job. So I look at it, I try to give people a little bit benefit of the doubt. Well, reasonable people can, but it's like, you're the guy protector of the Constitution. I mean, do you not understand who you are or what your job is? I mean, if you want to be if you care about Obamacare and you want people, then run for office. But if you want to be in the Supreme Court, your one job is to protect the people from an out-of-control federal government. And he completely said, I don't care about that. I mean, I don't give him a pass on this at all. The guy completely failed, and he's going to have to take that up with his legacy and his history. But anyway, one more question. I appreciate your time. What do you think's going to happen? I mean, it's hard. I know it's 14 people in this Republican primary. I have my thoughts. I kind of think that the next president of the United States is probably going to be Rubio, Scott Walker, Hillary Clinton. I think those are the three people that actually can win for various reasons. What do you think's going to happen in this election?
I actually have written about Rubio being the best candidate because I like I like very much his message. I think it's time that people began to rally around what really is important in this country, what makes our country great, not all the splinter issues. And I call it mandarism of the government. We're talking more and more about fewer and fewer people involved in issues, right? I mean, we're splintering the electorate in ways that no one could even have dreamed of 20 years ago. I mean, I think it's time to start thinking about the majority. And the majority of this country loves our country, and they love the things that really made it great, the individualism and the creativity and the opportunity. And I think there is nobody like a first-generation immigrant. I've met so many in my life whose parents came here from Vietnam or from Cuba or whatever, and they get it. They understand why this is so special and worth fighting for in a way that Americans maybe have forgotten. So
I think you like what I think what you like what Rubio. What I always say about Rubio, I think we like the same thing. Is since Reagan, he's the first one that really makes you feel great about the country and what makes the country special. He's got a way with his story and just who he is of like, this country's so special, there's nothing like it in the world. And he really connects in that way with people on an emotional level like Reagan did that none of the other Republicans can.
I think that's right. And certainly when you watch him, I think I compared him to Jordan Spieth, the golfer, in sort of you take this pride in him. He's such an attractive young man, and he's so genuine, and he's passionate about this. And compare him with Hillary Clinton, who is the most corrupt individual ever to run for president, I think. Yeah. And just the contrast is so enormous and so winning for Rubio. And even though I personally like Jeb Bush, he's a very smart, capable man, and I think he would make a terrific president, honestly, and I'm sure you disagree with that.
That's fine. Yeah.
But I don't think he's the right guy for right now because he is too much like Hillary, not at all in policy, but in terms of who he is, what he represents, et cetera. And so, you know, I think it'll be a battle between those two. I think that Scott Walker is wonderful in terms of what he's accomplished in his home state. I worry that he has a huge target on his back because he is so anti-union, and that's kind of his reputation. So that even, you know, there are a lot of Americans, and in fact a lot in his own state, who have voted for Republicans. But I just feel like the energy of the unions, employees across the country, are going to be really, really directed to defeat him in a way that other candidates might not feel so keenly. And I also think that Scott Walker is pretty weak on foreign affairs, whereas Rubio, interestingly, you know, he has made it his business to really be grounded in foreign entanglements and problems. And by the way, ironically, this election may be largely about that. I mean, it's very hard. I don't know if you heard the clip from Jimmy Carter saying that, you know, he couldn't think of a single country where Obama had improved our standing. Well, you know, guess what? Hillary Clinton was there at his side the whole time. So I do think that's going to be a pretty important issue. Well,
as we saw some of these ISIS attacks in Tunisia and stuff like that, you take one beach attack or one big attack here in the United States with ISIS, it'll change everything in a hurry.
Oh, totally.
So
totally right.
Hopefully that doesn't happen. But anyway, thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate what you do. Your article's great. And thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me on. Take care now.
Thanks. That's Liz Peek. She's a writer with FoxNews.com. Writes for also the Fiscal Times, and very, very thoughtful, bright woman. All right. Hope you're enjoying the show. You're listening to American Taxpayer Revolution. I'm your host, Attorney Todd Long. We'll be back here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA.